Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing one of the most unexpectedly fun move updates from the Season 25 balance patch, and that is Dragon Breath being given to Shadow Tyranitar. Previously, Shadow Tyranitar had Bite and Smackdown, two damage-focused fast moves, so Dragon Breath is a really nice addition. Dragon Breath gives Tyranitar incredibly fast pacing, being able to spam out Brutal Swings every 9 turns. Now, Shadow Tyranitar, it's not meta by any means in the Great League. This is more spiced to anti-meta, but oh my goodness, I went on a crazy run with this team, pairing it up with Ludicolo and Gourgeist. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and in game number 1, we lead Shadow Tyranitar into a Shadow Volt Switch Fortress. Fortress is going to try and debuff with the Rock Tomb, but before they can get there, I fire off the Brutal Swing and inflict some serious damage. The shield comes up from Tyranitar. Shadow Tyranitar is a very glassy Pokemon, but look at the pacing on Tyranitar. Tyranitar able to get to 3 Brutal Swings before they can get to a second Rock Tomb. That pacing is just crazy. They shield, they lose charge attack priority, and Shadow Tyranitar just won the ones against the Steel Bug type. In comes Ludicolo. Ludicolo looking for a farm down that they're not going to get. And let's see this damage. This Stone Edge is debuffed by the Rock Tomb, and it still almost one-shots Ludicolo. In comes Gourgeist. In the back is Shadow Celio, and this is working out amazingly for me. I am a complete wall to energy from this Celio. Celio will end up no shielding, and now that I've gotten it low enough, I'm just going to send in my Ludicolo. My opponent is forced to go for Body Slams. The Body Slams will add up over time, but I was able to preserve the Gourgeist for later, and I will get a pretty nice Astonish farm down with the Ludicolo. Ludicolo exits with a charge attack loaded. I do lose charge attack priority because I have a very, very good Ludicolo, but Weather Ball is double resisted and will simply fail to take the knockout. Even if they had Leaf Stormed, I can still just win the game as long as I have a shield for Gourgeist. In comes Gourgeist, Incinerate takes the KO, and that's a good game. Great lead in the next match, Shadow Tyranitar into Gourgeist. Tyranitar is even able to outpace 10 turns Seed Bomb pacing, 9 turns to the Brutal Swing, and while this will not knock out, it will inflict devastating damage onto Gourgeist. Gourgeist, over farming by 1 Incinerate, gonna fire off the Seed Bomb, but they're just strictly getting outpaced. In comes Clefable, and I'm staying in with the Tyranitar. I'm going for the Stone Edge. Do they respect it? They do not! Clefable gets rocked, and now I just send in my own Gourgeist. Clefable is incredibly spammy. They're going to hit me for big damage with Moonblast, but I get a nice farm down with my Gourgeist, and I will be able to make it to a Shadow Ball before they can incinerate me down. This Shadow Ball will guarantee a knockout or the final shield, and once I get the final shield, I'm actually going to be bringing in Ludicolo. I know that my Tyranitar doesn't have a lot of energy, and Ludicolo will always be able to absorb a charge attack. They undertapped, so they very well could have thrown the Seed Bomb, and they did go for the Seed Bomb. That works out very nicely for Ludicolo. In the back is Licky, and Licky is not going to appreciate a Leaf Storm when they have no shields to hide behind. Leaf Storm lands, that's big damage. In comes Tyranitar, and Tyranitar should be a wall to Licky energy, as Licky typically runs Body Slam and Shadow Ball. Licky forced to throw another charge attack at the Tyranitar. Body Slam will be delivering a knockout. Back in comes Ludicolo. Ludicolo, Weather Ball, going to be winning charge attack priority over the Licky, and unfortunately for my opponent, they just don't have a way to win this game because Ludicolo still has the shield to hide behind. They do not have back-to-back charge attacks, so Ludicolo will shield. They go for the Shadow Ball. We Astonish down, and we're able to take the win. We move to the next match, picking up a great lead, Shadow Tyranitar into Dusknoir. This is actually the non-Shadow Dusknoir, which is a bit of a surprise. The non-Shadow means that they can probably win the Zeros by barely surviving a Brutal Swing, whereas the Shadow would always just get one shot. But my opponent will put up the shield anyway. Even though they're almost assuredly going for a bait, I am always going to be respecting it because if I ever try and call a bait, I'm worried that'll just get Dynamic Punched, and if they're staying in, they're clearly weak to Tyranitar. Brutal Swing is going to get the shield. Opponent will fire off energy right before I get this Brutal Swing number 2. I'm going to be shielding up, firing off another Brutal Swing, taking the knockout, and I will exit with quite a bit of energy. So this Brutal Swing will easily be knocking out the Dusknoir. Opponent going to send in a Sand Slash. Sand Slash going to take huge damage from Stone Edge. They catch onto an Azumarill, but this is very fine. I'm actually going to stay in and let the Tyranitar get farmed down because I want to preserve an ability to switch. I'll obviously be able to take the knockout with the Ludicolo, but the moment I do, I want the ability to switch into the Gourgeist and lock in some big Incinerate damage on the Sand Slash. Azumarill is able to land some pretty solid damage. I'm going to farm up and make sure that I have a Leaf Storm plus a Weather Ball, because this Weather Ball is going to be what wins me this game. They send in the Sand Slash, in comes Gourgeist, and these Incinerates are absolutely shredding. The best part is Ice Punch does not put me in farm down range. My opponent will have to throw again. And once they take the knockout, if you remember, I stored that Weather Ball on the Ludicolo, so I can bring back in the Ludicolo. I'm just throwing on alignment because I know I have that charge attack loaded. Weather Ball KOs the Sand Slash, and we're able to take the win. Hopping into the next match, great lead Shadow Tyranitar into Jellicent. Jellicent will be able to survive a brutal swing, but not by much. My opponent safe switches into a Licky Licky, and Licky Licky is probably completely walled here. Tyranitar launches Stone Edge, devastating damage, and I save the Tyranitar and get a catch onto the Ludicolo. Ludicolo gonna be hit with a body slam, that's not gonna do much. Unfortunately, I didn't time my catch to get a sneak, so a bit of an error on my part there. I should have done one fewer Dragon Breath. Shadow Ball will land, that does do some sizable damage, but I'm able to get the farm down, that's quite nice. Opponent gonna be bringing in the Alolan Ninetales, and I farm up to the back-to-back Weather Balls. They have to respect a Leaf Storm, so I should always get a shield, and then once I do, I think I can always win this game by just aggressively pivoting into the Gourgeist, because Gourgeist is going to lock in some nice damage with Incinerate. My opponent will be able to threaten big damage with Weather Ball, but the important thing is I am now up energy. Gourgeist versus this Jellicent. Gourgeist, I can just go straight Shadow Ball now because I have that one Incinerate head start. The Shadow Ball gets shielded, my opponent farms up a ton of energy, but I can always just undertap the Shadow Ball because I have it banked. My opponent goes for the Shadow Ball, I fire off a Shadow Ball of my own, and things are looking pretty good here. Shadow Ball is going to land, quick switch into the Ludicolo to snipe him down. In comes Alolan Ninetales, and I send out Tyranitar. Tyranitar should be able to Brutal Swing and get the Dragon Breath down and take the win. The Brutal Swing does slightly less than anticipated, and that gives them the perfect farm. I think I should have just brought in the Gourgeist, and then I would have been fine. But I thought I could Dragon Breath down after, and I could not, and I actually end up getting reverse swept by the Ninetales. Man, I felt like I had some really good opportunities in this game, but unfortunately, it slipped away from me. Dream lead in the next match, Shadow Tyranitar into Talonflame. My opponent safe switches Empoleon, and I end up making a misswap. What I should have done was brought in the Ludicolo, as Ludicolo has a Metal Sound resist. So even though Drill Peck hits for a super effective damage, it would be more difficult to farm me down. Whereas by sending in the Gourgeist, I can force a shield, but unfortunately I have lost switch advantage. I guess the only advantage of sending in the Gourgeist is that way, if I lose switch, then the Gourgeist doesn't end up on the Talonflame, and instead it's going to be the Ludicolo, which can still put in some pretty nice work. I undercharge, hoping they live on 1 HP, but unfortunately they do not. Back in comes the Talonflame. Talonflame not really doing a lot with Incinerate. I will fire off the Weather Ball water. Weather Ball does get shielded, and it's time. In comes Tyranitar. In the back is Gastrodon. Oh no! But look at Shadow Tyranitar. Shadow Tyranitar at the back-to-back brutal swings first will connect, throwing one Dragon Breath and the move to ensure the Mud Slap does not land. Brutal swing takes the knockout, down goes Gastrodon, in comes Talonflame, and guess what, Talonflame? It's all over. Shadow Tyranitar, 2 brutal swings, knocking out the Gastrodon, Stone Edge KOs the Talonflame, and oh my goodness, this Pokemon is an absolute blast. Hopping into the next match, and it appears someone else is on the Shadow Tyranitar hype train, as we lead Shadow Tyranitar into Shadow Tyranitar. Now, I'm always going to be losing charge attack priority in the mirror. My opponent no shields the first, and I'm able to get a catch of the Brutal Swing and a sneak onto the Ludicolo. Ludicolo more than happy to absorb that damage. My opponent now sends out Venusaur. Venusaur will actually throw energy pretty quickly. The Venusaur, I guess, may have been worried about a potential Ice Beam, but I am not running it. Now in comes Gourgeist. Gourgeist, these Incinerates adding up quite considerably. The unfortunate thing about this situation is I don't think I can farm down before they get another move. They throw the Frenzy, as that will do quite a lot of resisted damage, and I'm just going to take the knockout with the double resisted Seed Bomb. If my opponent tries to bring back in the Tyranitar, I have energy, but they do not. Instead, they bring in the Gourgeist. If they shield, I just win with Tyranitar. They end up no shielding, so I also just win with Tyranitar. Tyranitar Dragon Breaths down and takes the win. Bit of an interesting lead in the next match, Shadow Tyranitar into Morpeko. My opponent safe switches into Azumarill, and I will respond with the Ludicolo. Ludicolo, double resisting Bubble is really nice in this matchup. Azumarill ends up going for an Ice Beam. Now, typically, I believe you do want to go for double play rough in this matchup, but either way you go about it, it's pretty dominant for the Ludicolo. Ludicolo's Leaf Storm is going to land, that's devastating damage, and my opponent reveals that their final Pokemon is Spidops. Spidops not going to take basically any damage from Weather Ball, and I'm going to get aggressive and pivot into Gourgeist. Gourgeist, not something that the Morpeko wants to deal with either, so Spidops is kind of going to have to stay in here, and Spidops is taking a lot of damage. I farm up a lot of energy firing off the Shadow Ball, not on the greatest timing, but I just need to start pressuring shields away from my opponent. Spidops now going to be forced to double shield. Gourgeist putting in some very serious work. Spidops is going to get the farm down. No, they switch into Morpeko, but I'm able to bank a Seed Bomb for later and send in Tyranitar. Tyranitar shields up as Morpeko baits with the Psychic Fangs, and I should be able to Dragon Breath it into a range where I can knock out with a Brutal Swing. At least that is the hope. So I fire off the Brutal Swing. I know this is resisted. Morpeko barely hangs on, and Morpeko will be able to force the final shield. I think their switch clock is up, so I'm actually going to under tap here, anticipating the snipe. But they don't go for it. They stay on the field. That is a little bit unfortunate. However, they have so much energy that they should just always throw. So we're going to get the game-winning catch onto Gourgeist. Gourgeist going to get knocked out with the lunge, but now I can send in the Ludicolo. Ludicolo will get knocked out with the lunge as well. But the good news is they just don't have a third move. So in comes Tyranitar, Dragon Breath take the knockout, and we're able to get the win. Oh my goodness, nightmare lead in the next match. Shadow Tyranitar into Pangoro. Pangoro beats this entire team, and so does Wigglytuff. So this team is the absolute worst case scenario that I could ever hope to see. Weather Ball is going to be no shielded. A Leaf Storm does not knock out from full, so I'd rather lock in some damage and then try and flip switch. But unfortunately, even a switch flip doesn't really do a lot for me, considering I'm triple weak to the Panda. Leaf Storm takes the knockout, so I'm able to flip switch, but that comes at a pretty serious cost. And that is a massive farm down for Pangoro. I send in the Gourgeist, but Gourgeist is probably going to get two-shot by Night Slashes. Panda has a massive attack stat, so unfortunately, it looks like barring like a Talonflame in the back or something like that, there's just no path forward for me in this game. I will shield once just because I need to lock in some damage on the Panda. The biggest thing I need in this moment is not even the shield, but just trying to get the Incinerate damage from my opponent. I'm going to let this go. I'm going to win the game or lose the game with Shadow Tyranitar. In comes Tyranitar. Look at the Karate Chops go. This is only a Night Slash, but I have to shield because even a Night Slash would do a ton of damage. So I will put up the shield. In the back is Jellicent, and unfortunately, I am going to lose this game. Brutal Swing from a Shadow Tyranitar is going to inflict absolutely massive damage on Jellicent, but unfortunately, it's just not going to be enough. Brutal Swing lands, Jellicent goes from full health to deep in the red, but they do hang on. Against two of the worst core breakers we could ever see, we make it close, but unfortunately not close enough. Moving to the next match, terrible lead leading Tyranitar into Marowak. A safe switch Ludicolo, opponent responds, not with a Shadow Scizor, but with a regular Scizor. Seeing the regular Scizor is a pretty massive surprise because obviously the Shadow is better at just about everything. Trailblaze lands, but because they ended up no shielding a Weather Ball, I can just Astonish down. My opponent sends out their final Pokemon, and it's a Shadow Credilli. Shadow Credilli actually takes some pretty significant damage from Weather Ball. Unfortunately, I just don't have enough HP to make another move. In comes Tyranitar. Tyranitar has to respect the Grass Knot. My opponent should look to switch here momentarily, and they do. Shadow Marowak getting put in jail by the Gourgeist. Opponent mistimes their charge attack, and that's an entire free Incinerate. What was already a bad matchup gets even worse. Gourgeist launching the Seed Bomb no shielded by the Marowak, and back in comes the Credilli. Credilli, I guess their only hope would be an acid farm down, but Gourgeist is just too spammy. Gourgeist will be able to burn the switch clock by firing off these Seed Bombs, and then I can send in Tyranitar to close out the game. Seed Bomb is going to be shielded. In comes Tyranitar. There is the Brutal Swing. You know Shadow Tyranitar is winning that cap tie. Brutal Swing KOs Credilli, and we're able to get the game. Hopping into the final match, Shadow Tyranitar against Shadow Celio. Shadow Celio obviously can threaten massive damage with Surf, and an important thing to watch for here will be the Powder Snow damage. Shadow Celio obviously got a buff this season with extra Powder Snow damage, and the neutral Powder Snows are actually shredding Tyranitar. I'm going to respect the Surf, and they actually full send, which is a bit of a surprise. Tyranitar going to continue to farm. This can only be a Body Slam. They've realized that I am actively a Greatly Shadow Tyranitar, which means I'm not going to take hits particularly well, so they're able to lock in some critical damage. Brutal Swing does get shielded. I'm now going to pivot into Ludicolo because I know that my backline doesn't really fear energy from the Celio, and I'd rather save the Tyranitar for a catch later on. Celio, I think, will get knocked out after 2 Astonishes, so I throw 2 Astonishes, go for the Weather Ball. It's resisted, but it does pick up the KO. In the back, what is this? It's Grumpig. Oh my goodness, I do miss Grumpig being a meta Pokemon. Grumpig is about to get sent back to the Pokeball with a Leaf Storm. And in the back, oh no, it's another Mud Slapper. Hello, Marowak. Shadow Marowak, it just can't do anything against the Gourgeist. Rock Slide is going to land. Gourgeist does not care, doubling up on the Seed Bombs, and this game is over. Seed Bomb into the Marowak, takes the knockout. We don't even need the second Seed Bomb, and that is a good game. Even after seeing the Dragon Breath update, I didn't have any expectations for a greatly Shadow Tyranitar. So the fact that it's now like a very playable spice pick and a Pokemon that you can use to actually get real wins is a really, really cool update. I was expecting the Dragon Breath Tyranitar to absolutely destroy in the Mega Master League, but for it to also have even just a tiny little bit of play as a spice pick in the Great League, I am a huge fan of. This pacing is absolutely terrifying. It's the exact same pacing as Corviknight to Air Cutter, but the big difference, obviously, is that Shadow Tyranitar has a monster attack stat. So whereas Air Cutter is a much weaker move than Brutal Swing, and Corviknight doesn't have a very high attack stat, Air Cutter, it's very spammy, but it doesn't really do a lot of damage. Whereas Shadow Brutal Swing, even in neutral matchups, actually does a very considerable amount of damage. So I'm very pleasantly surprised. I was inspired to run the Dragon Breath Shadow Tyranitar because I queued into someone who was actually playing the Dragon Breath Shadow Aerodactyl. And Aerodactyl, I barely escaped with my life. The Aerodactyl made that game very close, and I was like, wow, if Aerodactyl was actually somewhat playable, I think Shadow Tyranitar is just going to be strictly better. From there, when it came to team building, honestly, the easiest Pokemon to pair with was obviously going to be the Gourgeist, because not only does Gourgeist provide a very important fighting resist, but Gourgeist can also shut down Scizor, it shuts down Mud Slap, and I think that's why we're going to see Gourgeist on so many teams this season, even if people don't necessarily have the optimal Gourgeist size. Just because Gourgeist, it does things that honestly no other Pokemon can do in the meta. When you're a Dark Rock type Pokemon, you need all the defensive resistances you can get. So having something like a Gourgeist in the back just made entirely too much sense. And for the Ludicolo is a Pokemon that I did want to try. I think Ludicolo, having to rely on Leaf Storm a lot, can end up feeling a little bit inconsistent. But again, much like Gourgeist, it's a Pokemon and typing combination that we haven't really seen in the meta before, so I think purely off that it does have value. Being a grass type that has counterplay against fire types is a really cool archetype. We've seen Credilli have success with it before, and I think Ludicolo is a perfectly usable mon now. But I'm going to circle back to Tyranitar because this is the Tyranitar video. Tyranitar, as I mentioned, it's not like a top meta threat or anything like that, but it's really fun spice. And I believe I ended up going 17-8 with this team today, and I believe that quite a few of my losses, I ended up making misplays, so I think the team could have even performed better if I was playing better. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoy watching content like this, please do consider leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And an extra special thank you, as always, to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.